Hey, everybody, this is Chris Mahan with Lead Your Teen Podcast. If you are new to this podcast, welcome. We're all about the parent child relationship with an emphasis on parental leadership, something that is desperately needed in today's homes, in our society. We see the lack of leadership with our kids in our schools, in our courtrooms, in our streets. It's just totally out of hand. And today I have a very special guest. I'm super excited to have Jason Raitz here. Jason and I have been speaking for a couple months. He's a super busy speaker, podcaster, author. He's doing it all. He's also the father of five, so he has some experience with what we're talking about today. And what we're going to be doing is figuring out how do we best talk to our kids. Jason is a communication expert. He's a leader in this field, and I am so honored to have him on today's show. He was also going to be in the new version of my book, Parental Leadership: Seven Principles to Lead Your Teen in the Digital Age. So he'll be talking about all this, probably more, because I'm going to cut more of this into the book than what we can do today. So, welcome, Jason. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me. This is great. Love this conversation and love that you're providing this kind of resource for parents. It's so needed.
Well, this is something that's been weighing on my heart for a long time, and I'm sure as a parent, you got five kids. I'm sure you've had some experience in the communication ups and downs when it comes to young people. And we were talking a second ago, and I was asking you, how did you get started in this? So, explain to everybody what your philosophy is on communication.
Yeah. Very early on, my parents took me to a rock concert in downtown Detroit. I think it
Mm,
was Bob Seger, way
awesome. Love
back
Bob
when.
Seger. Love Bob
Love
Seger.
it. I'm in the top row of the Fox Theater. I'm watching, thousands of adults scream and yell, and then at the very end, of course, I think there were some substances that helped them, be a little bit more,
Open.
yeah, than they normally would be. But at the very end, Bob Seger walks up to the microphone and he starts to tell a story, and the entire place just goes quiet. I mean, a minute ago, screaming, yelling, and then within seconds, as he is talking into a microphone, as he's telling a story, the entire place just got so quiet. I was 11 years old, and I can remember at that time thinking, wow, there's something really powerful to this communication thing. So, true story, went home the next day. I built a stage in my parents' basement in Detroit, and I would bribe my neighborhood friends with my mom's chocolate cookies if they would come over and listen to me speak from the stage. I would tell stories, I would sell stuff, I would do anything. And so from that moment, I think just this whole idea of we either speak with people or we speak at them, with or at, started to formulate. And I was really blessed. I had parents who modeled healthy communication to me. And I think it's the difference. There's, especially in the leadership world that I run in, sometimes we talk about being an effective communicator a lot. I don't think that's enough. I think there's a lot of effective communicators who speak at people. And when I say speak at people, I mean speak from a place of fear, speak with manipulative ways, speak with control, speak with force, speak with an unhealthy command. And you can get pretty much anybody to do what you want when you communicate that way. I think there's a better way. I think there's a healthier way. And so I think it's good to be effective, but we need to be healthy and effective and speak with people. And so, you and I take our breathing for granted. We take all of these breaths all day long. Hardly ever do I stop, at what's the time? 12:14 and go, ooh, wow, that was a great breath. I need to write that in my gratitude journal.
Yeah, right.
Hardly, we hardly do that. But when I get sick and my chest starts to get tingly and okay, I start to notice, and then I start to complain, and then my wife, who's birthed four children and we have five, she's like, "Grow up, man. You're okay. Like you just have like a cough."
Yeah.
But in our communication, I think the same thing happens. We take it for granted because research says we communicate 80 to 90% of our day. And we never stop to think, okay, is what I'm communicating healthy? Is what I'm communicating effective? Am I actually connecting or am I just shoving information, dumping information, spewing information? And, from early on, I got to witness my parents communicate with me And then I had friends at school who, I saw it all the time. Parents, would yell at them in the parking lot, or they'd strike out on the baseball diamond, and they're just screaming at them in front of all these different type of people. So this philosophy of speaking with, speaking at really started to take hold, because healthy communication is oxygen for
Right.
our relationships. And so it's hard. It's hard to speak with people, because you're not speaking from a place of fear and control and manipulation, but you're speaking from a place of trust and joy and collaboration. And so, for me, this is where that's kind of the place that has been birthed. And then in me, there's just something throughout the years, since I'm a communicator, I just have loved connecting with people and see the absolute difference, whether it's one-on-one, whether you're standing from a stage, whether it's a walk with one of my kids and I'm having a conversation. When I don't have to force something down someone's throat, when I don't have to make them obey because I'm, manipulating them or using sarcasm, but I can actually speak in a way that's healthy. I speak in a way that breathes life into them.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the difference. And I've seen that. My oldest is 25, youngest is 11. We adopted him from China. He has autism. He's on the spectrum. It was we've learned so much about communication by adopting a little boy with autism.
Right.
And then our older four, it was a much different story. They were kind of your stereotypical, uh, dad's the hero of the world. I could do no wrong.
Yeah.
And then with, my adopted son, it took years. It took years of learning how he communicated and how he saw the world. And again, it would have been easy for me. And at times I have messed up and have wanted to mess up even more, but force my communication at him to get him to listen. But through his autistic lens, it just doesn't work. And
Doesn't
so
work.
being
Yeah.
able to take a step back and go, okay, I need to understand how he communicates. Then our second, when he went through high school, he's 22 now. When he went through high school, went through a massive depression, anxiety, uh, to the place where he didn't finish high school. Like, we had to pull him. He would sleep
Oh,
16, 18 hours a day. I mean, it was hell on earth for 3 years while we're trying to figure out how to get him help, and doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists, and wondering, what is going on with him. And so then that's where it really pushed my communication to the brink, because I mean, there were days where I'm going, you've got to get out of bed. You've got to get out of bed. You've got to
right.
go to school. You can't miss another day of school. So all of that long story to say, communication's always been my passion. I love how it can drastically change relationships and help people connect in a way that they never even possibly imagined. And so I get to help people do that all the time. I spent years speaking to high school students and middle school students, and now I spend most of my time speaking in the corporate world. But it's the same principles. How do we communicate in a way with our clients, with our kids, with our spouse, with our neighbors, our coworkers, in a way that amplifies our influence in their life, that builds deep amounts of trust and keeps the connection going?
That's awesome. And I like that you tied in the business side with the parent side, because in my philosophy, I have leader style parents and manager style parents. And the manager style parent would be exactly what you're talking about. They their communication is horrible. They use authority, they use guilt, they use shaming, they use bribes. I think parents, love using bribes, and they start that when kids are really little. Like, if you're
Yep.
quiet, I'll give you a candy bar. But as that child gets older, those bribes become more and more expensive, and they're bigger, and then parents can't live up to it. So now what have you got? Now you've got a
Right.
kid that's only going to behave if they get a token, a reward of some kind, and they want, $300 shoes or concert tickets, whatever it is.
Yep.
And so I think parents are needing to develop these communication skills when kids are just learning how to talk, and especially
Yes.
going into kindergarten. Those formidable 0 to 5 years are so important, because that's what I believe is going to lead to the development of stronger communication and trust. Um, I think it's great too that you're being honest with your story. My boys, I've always told people, like, I teach this stuff, and I had some issues with my two sons. We had some family things going on, and I didn't realize what all the things were going on with them until my oldest had a blow up one night, and he was pulling his hair, and he knows I'm going to talk about this, so he'll be fine with it. But he was 21, And for several years, he didn't feel that he was doing enough. He wasn't enough. There was all these things going on, but he
Mm,
wouldn't tell me out
yep.
of fear. I don't know why. Like I've never been like a yeller screamer at them. When they were younger, I did because I was what I call a manager style parent. I was a horrible like dad at the beginning. Never spanked my kids, but I would to get my point across. I would yell at them. I thought
Yep.
the louder I got, the more influence I had,
Yep.
or the deeper my voice, the stronger they would listen. And really, they just blocked me out. You know, it was terrible.
Yeah.
So as they got older, I'm trying to now talk to them about different things, and he's like, "Well, I don't know if I can tell you." So early communication skills, like what you're talking about, are so important. What do you think parents could do? Like, what are some things that you use in the corporate world or with your business clients that you could tell parents, "Hey, if you do these things, you might be able to start opening up lines of communication, trust, some openness." What are some things that you could, some advice you could give some people on that?
Yeah, that's great. And I love the how you've defined that because uh, so often the biggest answer is to go back in time. So if you have a 17-year-old who you can't communicate with, you guys are not, you're knocking heads all the time, the yelling, the screaming, the door slamming. Probably the best solution is to hop in a DeLorean, go back in
Yeah,
time,
that's what I tell people. Yeah.
and that's right. When they're toddlers, you, parents, you're being watched every second. And so you get to model how you communicate to your spouse. You get to model
100%.
how you communicate to your partner. You get to model how you communicate to your parents,
Hmm.
to your neighbors. And so if your kids constantly see you demean people, talk about them behind their back, when the neighbor goes in the door and then you start saying, horrible things about them, they're picking all of that up. Their brains are just absolute sponges. I
Yep.
spoke in public schools for a long time. I did assemblies and I got to know a lot of principals. I heard so many stories, and principals would tell me stories of, kids they had to give detention to or bring in the principal's office. And, one time a principal was telling me a story about how she had to suspend a girl because of the girl was screaming and why the F did you do this? And, F you and F this. So literally the mother gets there, walks in the door and is like, F you, F this. Why did you, it was like,
Now
okay,
we get it. Yeah, yeah.
that's it. We went back, even through the teenage years when we were at a restaurant together as a family. If our kids, when it was their time to order, if they didn't look at the waiter or waitress in the eye, we would stop the table and say, okay, let's do that again. When we talk to people, we look them in the eye.
Right.
When we talk to people, we use our voice and we project. We did all of those, things in the very beginning. Teenage years, boy, it gets tricky. I think the biggest lesson I learned as a parent, and then I've taught over the years, and I think it translates, to where I'm at in the corporate world and business world, and how you can win as a leader in your space. If you've got to force the conversation to happen, probably great things aren't going to happen from it for a while. And
Right.
so, what do I mean by that? My third, he and I, he's 20 now, but our brain basically is attached. Uh, we kind of grew up together watching The Office, and that's what she said comments, and all of that kind of
My
stuff.
house too.
That's right. I love it. Well, there'd be moments where we'd be driving home for football practice, and I wanted to talk. Like I'm asking all these questions, and it was on my time. He wasn't ready to talk. 10 o'clock, he was unbelievably ready to talk. Well, I'm an early morning. I go to 10 o'clock. I've been bedded for a while, but I had to learn, okay, yes, there are some times we're going to have to talk when it's, you know, not ideal for him, but I also needed to kind of meet halfway and go, hey, if I want to get some deeper conversations, I got to be ready when he's ready. And that
Right.
happened with all of my other kids. So, instead of forcing something, parents, we do this a lot. Kids get in the car. How was school? Good. Well, great. I'm glad that, I've
One
invested
word
all this
answers.
money for you
Yeah.
to, yeah. And then we kind of do all this backhanded, type stuff, do everything you possibly can to shield, that from all of that kind of stuff. I think the other thing that I tried to do, because because we all have moments, right? We say
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
I
Oh
I
yeah.
mean,
I've had
yeah.
many.
Oh, I mean, it's just happy. You're like,
Too
where did
many.
that come from? Can I
Yeah.
get it back? Especially for me, I'm thinking like sarcasm and sarcastic comments like all the time and trying to rein all of those in. But when my kids were rude to my wife, a lot of times we just let that stuff slide, and so the rudeness is like this giant, snowball.
Yeah.
And the first time it's like, okay, that was funny. The second time it was like, but it gets to this place where it's like, wow, I should have said something. Well, yeah, you
Yeah.
should have said something when the snowball was this big.
When it first
And
happened.
so, yeah, when my kids would, say something disrespectful or I don't want to do the dishes right now or, whatever, there were moments where I'd have to go, hey, yeah, you are not going to speak to my wife that way. Of course, she's your mother, but you are not going to speak that way, and even to each other. So I'm kind of roundabout all of a couple different ideas. One, be ready when they are. Two, become a great question asker. Enough with the boring questions. I teach this all the time in our training seminars. We ask these boring questions, we get boring results. Ask great questions instead of asking, how was your day at school? Ask things like, did anything happen to you that surprised you?
Hmm.
What was the best moment that you experienced between you and a friend? Just think through different ways to word things that they don't see coming. Uh, Number three, put these away. Like
Yeah.
we're
These
constantly.
are these are definitely a problem, you know.
Yes. How do we expect our kids to pay attention or let's talk to us when we're going, hey, hold on a second. Okay. All right. All right.
Exactly.
Put it down, have a conversation. Make sure I've been reading The Anxious Generation,
I've
by
got
Jonathan Haidt.
yes, I've got
Mm.
it on my auto. Amazing. I've quoted him many times. Great, great book. Great
Yeah.
book.
I mean, parents, if I could go back in time, I would have waited a long time before I gave them this device. And my kids
That's
never got wrapped up into, all the social media drama. They never got wrapped up into all of that stuff. But regardless, we're all, I'll say blanket statement, we're all addicted to them. And, especially their brains are in deep formulation mode
yes,
and
I
we're
say it all
giving
the
them these
time.
devices.
Yep.
You think about my 11-year-old, his generation, right? Pure digital, will never not know what's it like to not be online.
Yeah.
Uh, Even my 20-year-old, Gen Z, when you ask them, when they ask you something, they want a response right now.
Yeah.
It's instant. Why haven't you texted me back? It's only been 2 seconds. Uh,
Or why don't you know that? Yeah, I have
right.
the same issue. When my boys, mine are 23 and be 21 in June, so we have some kids in the same kind of age group there. And when they were smaller, I did not want them on devices. I was just getting back into psychology. In college, I worked in film for 25 years, went back to school for psych, and I was reading all this stuff, and I thought, wow, the brain is just like you said earlier, a sponge, and is the everything is just changing and growing, and the information we put in is going to stick. And when they get on these devices, it does become addictive. And I said this years ago with video games. People say, "Oh, you're crazy," but they really do get that same dopamine rush or
Yep.
serotonin rush when they get a high score or something happens, and do become addicted to it. And now, 10 years later, 12 years later, we're seeing the results of this. We're seeing kids, like you said, that have grown up on these things. They don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to do a job interview. They don't know how to talk to someone with confidence. I
Yep.
see this all the time in my line of work with working with young people in the workforce. Um, they're just absolutely afraid of making a mistake. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. They're afraid that someone's going to get mad at them. And I'm like, where does this come from? And I think a lot
Yep.
of it comes from their lack of inability to communicate properly,
Mm.
to have a conversation, to ask a question, to feel confident in answering, even if they're
Yep.
wrong. How do they deal with that? So these are things too that communication is so important. I was talking to a guy about this the other day. I did a book fair and we were talking, and he was an IT guy, old military IT guy, and he was like, kids today talk in 140 characters or less, and we're going back to hieroglyphics with the emojis and all. I thought, well, that's okay. that's we're almost like with all our technology, we're almost going backwards when it comes to communication.
Right?
And I see a lot of this in the homes. The biggest thing though, what are some tips that, I mean, I like the thing earlier about talking with, what are some things you could tell parents, like just basic communication 101? You know, they're having a problem with their kid. I see this all the time. The kid is failing in school, getting in fights. They're button heads every day. But as a leader, the parent as a leader, what can they do to turn this around? Like, what are some basic things they can do just tonight that they could do to say, I'm going to change
Oof.
the way I say something. I'm going to change the way I listen. I'm going to change the way, like you said, ask a different type of question. But would you say, real quick, then I'll let you answer, would you say that parents are, and maybe bosses in the workplace too, if they don't get the answer they want to hear right away, maybe it's their response too that should change. So, what are some things that parents should do to maybe change simply their communication style, their communication actions? Like, how do they listen? How do they speak? Um,
Oh, yeah.
to I know it's a lot.
Those
I
are
know I
great.
threw a lot at you, but I'm thinking of all these scenarios in my head that I've dealt with. So I'm just trying to put it all into a 30-second blurb.
Yeah, it was. I love it. And you were talking about kids don't know what to say in job interviews. You know, my kids, they were applying for jobs, and I'm like, okay, I think it's time. You've applied all online. Go into the Publix, ask for the manager. And,
Say
and
it all
and
the
their
time.
big excuse was, well, it's all done online, Dad. You don't understand. I'm like, no, here's what I do understand. I actually talked to the manager at Publix the other day and I asked if they were hiring. And he said, or she said, yes, just go online, apply, but then make sure they come in and tell me they applied because then I can look for them in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, the biggest tip I would say is, you know, parents, one, you've got to model this healthy communication. You've got to model having the kind of conversation that happens without the explosives. And I'm not, sometimes people confuse this. They think, well, wait a minute, I'm the parent. You know, in order to get things done, sometimes I have to. That's true. Sometimes you have
Carrot and
to
stick,
say
carrot
things
and
a little more
stick.
firm.
Yep.
Yes, that's going to happen. But if you one model healthy communication, you model you talking to other people in the household with respect, with kindness, without Sometimes as parents, our kid will say something and then we'll mumble something sarcastic under our breath. Well, they hear all of that. They're a sponge, and so now they're going to do that back to us. They're going to do that to their siblings. They're going to do that to. That's how they're learning how to communicate. And so that's one. Two, when you do speak with people, are your words do they harm them or do they help them? And so I think about this a lot. When I harm people with my words, I humiliate them. I'm assumptive. Uh, I think of things like
Sarcastic.
that. Yes,
Um,
when I help people, I'm honest with them. It's okay sometimes to say to your kids, "Hey, I need you to know that really hurt my feelings when you said this about me." It's okay to communicate, someone that way. But am I honest? Am I encouraging? Am I, we've taken the encouragements so far sometimes with parenting, especially with the generation where everybody got trophies just for,
oh,
stepping on the
don't start me
field.
on that. Yeah, that's
But
terrible.
on the other hand, we've, especially if you're a sports family, goodness gracious, if your kid doesn't make the travel team, you know, that is
End of
not
the
the
world.
time to berate them and do all that kind of stuff. So use ways to encourage them. Use words to challenge them, especially now. I think the research I've done with the technology, it's created this anxiety in kids, and we have to challenge them to say, hey, as a family, we're going to not be on this, and you can actually set it on your device. There's the times that nobody is going to be allowed on without a passcode, those kind of things. And so, have some of those kind of things. Also, parents, think about your body language as you talk to
Yes,
kids.
100%.
Yeah, if you're, arms crossed all the time, pointing at them, talking down to them, I, I don't I don't understand why you're confused if you're upset that they're not responding the way you want. So
Yep.
come with an appropriate body language. My shoulders squared up, my arms comfortable, I'm smiling, I'm looking at them. So often we think, well, this isn't a big deal, this is just comfortable. Well, it's kind of the universal
Sign of anger.
sign for defensiveness.
Yeah.
So there's some things, there's some things like that. Uh, Sometimes it's hard to turn back the clock. Families, if you haven't been having dinner as a family for a while, I mean, family dinner is a pretty phenomenal way to communicate because you sit around the table, you put the devices away. You could do something simple like high lows. What was your low today? What was your high? You could do two truths and a lie. Any of those type of stories. My parents are early 70s. I had a guest on my podcast, shameless plug, Speak with People podcast.
I'll plug it.
His
Don't
name is
worry.
Matthew Dix, and he is a world-renowned storyteller, six-time TED Talk, Moth storytelling genius. I mean, he's just genius. But he talked about how his parents, he's probably my age, his parents, there's not a lot online about them. You're not going to go find a YouTube channel with tons of videos. You're not going to find, they have a Facebook page where they post random stuff. But he's like, when my mom died, that was it. It was like the hard drive of her stories died,
Hmm.
and I couldn't get it back. And there was some stories. There were some things I wanted to make sure I asked my mom. That's hit me, super hard. My kids, yeah, there is pages, Google pages of podcasts and videos and
Yeah. Same.
picture.
Yeah.
Facebook is, filled with all that stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, so parents, have those conversations, model it, let them see that you're asking your parents questions. How do we do Friday night dinner at my parents every single week. And so, my kids are young adults now, but they come and they bring their significant others and we do dinner together as a family. That's
That's
just,
awesome.
there are some of those really practical things you could do. Um, Kids, Gen Z loves podcasts. Find a great podcaster that's talking about communication skills or something that they're interested in. My 22-year-old is a video game lover. I just don't like, I never got into it.
Yeah. Same.
I'd rather go outside and
Same.
play catch or shoot
Yeah.
hoops
Yep.
but guess what? I've learned stuff about video games. My 11-year-old is addicted to Minecraft and Roblox. And so I had to learn about the chat feature on Roblox because terribly destructive. But I've also had to learn. And April 4th, I can't wait to take him to see Minecraft the movie.
Oh, good.
Only because that. So sometimes, show interest in, what their interests are instead of trying to force it. I loved baseball. My boys played baseball, but it got to a place where they were just like, Dad, we're done. And, I had to be okay with that,
Yeah.
and move on. So there's, in there, I think a bunch of practical ways how you can, immediately improve conversation. If it's at like a explosive, every night is, DEFCON 5, definitely get into a counselor, get into a great counselor that can, see you separately, them separately, you guys together, you know, uh, get these kind of conversations going. Because sometimes parents, you may need to hear something that is difficult for you to hear, but
It's in the
will
book.
will help your connection.
Yeah, you're saying everything. I think you've read my book. I mean, this is awesome. And I say that as a compliment because when you're writing a book, I know you're writing one right now. Um, Things that are important to me or things that I think are important to me. So, but are they going to be important to somebody else?
Right.
And is it going to be the same? Is it going to have the same significance to them? And so, I think as parents, we all go through a lot of the same concerns. And that is, am I doing enough? Am I developing this young brain to be an effective, self-sufficient adult one day? And one of the things I do with communication is I change the word from raising to develop. I
Mm.
don't use the word raise because to me it's like for crops and animals. And a lot of times
So good.
parents say, well, they're 18 now, so they're on their own. Well, no 18-year-old today is on their own. And if they're
Right.
not developed enough from early on, this is when we're seeing 25 and 30-year-olds afraid to leave home or having problems. So I tell people that I have a plan in the book. It's like a business plan. It's a 20-year parenting plan, but it's designed like a business plan. And it's a 5-year increments, and every 2.5 to 3 years, you reassess where you are. Is my son or daughter developing okay? Are they getting along? Are they communicating? Are we as a family having any issues or changes that we need to address? And how is that going to change the conversations of what we do? And I think a lot of parents today, outside of communication, are just afraid to know how to lead. I know leadership is a big thing for you. And, how do you lead your kid? Well, like you said earlier, you have to model good behavior and show them that you're not a superhero. Unfortunately, everyone wants to think that, but parents make mistakes. My dad just passed away a year ago, and this last year I've been really reflecting on my relationship with him. I'm 57 years old, so he was 86, and there was a time when he and I were great, and then there was a time when we weren't, and I was in my 50s, and I began to see things from through a child's perspective instead of an adult's perspective,
Mm.
and it really bothered me. I didn't talk to my dad for a year. I was very embarrassed about that, but I didn't. But by the time I got to see him as a person and understand where he was coming from, I kind of understood a little bit better, what happened
Yep.
years earlier. And I think when parents try to put up the illusion that they're never going to make a mistake, it makes the kid sometimes feel like, well, mom or dad never made a mistake, so I can't, right? I can't make
Yes.
a mistake. And look what they did at this age. How come I'm not there yet? So being honest with your kids. My oldest son, they're both Marines now, but my oldest, I worked in film for 25 years. My brother still works in film. He owns Legacy Effects. He was just up for an Oscar a few weeks ago. Um, and he went out to California at 17. I got into film at, I think, 24. And my oldest was like, what am I doing? Like, you guys have done all this stuff, and you were this old and you lived on your own. And I said, Liam, the cost of living wasn't like it is today. I mean, my
Mm.
first apartment was only like $500. Okay. And, it was in Georgia, so it wasn't that much. And I had a roommate, so it was even better. Where if you want an apartment now, it's like 2,500. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So it is different. So we have to be honest with them that the times are different, but you're going to have your time to shine. You're going to have
Yep.
your time to go. So being honest also with communication is having those real conversations. Say, listen, it's a different time. 40 years ago, everything was different, and it's different for you now that I don't understand. I don't understand all the digital stuff all the time. I've got two laptops here and screen, everything else, but I still have issues with technology where my second son is working on F-35 fighter jets. And this stuff is like nothing to him. So whenever I have an issue, I call him. So we have to be
Wow.
honest with each other and say, listen, this is where I'm at. This is what I need. And we have to teach our kids that same ability to say, here's where I'm at. Here's what I need. And I think as parents and leaders, we have to have that openness to say, okay, I'm with you. I mean, that's kind of
Love
my
that.
philosophy.
That's
So,
so powerful.
you know,
Well, I love what you talk about between raise and develop. We talked all the time. Yeah, we're not raising kids. We're not raising kids. We're we are giving young adults the skills they need to thrive. Some things we did communication wise, like when our family went to move or we made a major family decision.
mhm.
Yes, the initial was, big part of it probably just between my wife and I, but we brought them in pretty soon.
Oh my,
I've had a
it's in
lot
the
of friends over
book.
the
It's in the
years.
book, Jason.
Yeah,
That's so
this is
awesome.
awesome.
That's
I love this.
awesome.
I mean, we actually asked their opinion.
Yep,
We've kind
I
of
talked
always
about that.
done a lot in leadership or volunteering. So we'd ask our kids, what would you do differently? How could this be better?
That
I
is
think it's the
awesome.
difference too. And I can't really see this, but this part of the page down here, that's the time of the life that we get with our toddlers and teenagers.
Hmm.
And then all of this extra is when they're adults, So mom and dads, if you're listening to this, I, you know, it's tiring, yes, but you're going to blink and
They're
I
gonna
know
be
you're in
gone.
that phase where
Yep.
you're like, your kids are gone, so do everything you can. As I've helped with my wife raise, develop our kids, I wanted to hopefully communicate in a way and build trust in a way and lead them in a way that they would want to have a relationship with me later in life. I have so many friends who their kids want nothing to do with them.
I hear that all the time myself. And I think that's to hear that from you as a dad, that's so powerful because a lot of dads are afraid to be that honest and to say that. That's something we can do a whole other podcast on the weak
Yes.
father, on how dads are
Oof.
portrayed in society and stereotypes and whatnot. I got a whole chapter on that too called The Weak Father. And my boys and I, they call me. Like the other day, my youngest called. I said anything wrong? He's like, no, I just want to check on you, see how you're doing. I'm like, okay, like that's kind of cool, and you know, being Marines, they're young, so they've all got some tattoos already, and they're doing their thing, but they're still my boys,
Yep.
and no matter what they're doing, this is something else I tell people too. And I'm just gonna wrap this up. I know you got to run. Jason's that busy, folks. He had another podcast after this. He's. I'm telling you, he's in demand. We're very lucky today. When parents tell me my kid's 18 and my job is done,
Yeah.
that kills me. Parenting does not have an end date. Well, your death is their end date, but you know, my dad's been gone for a year last week, and I'm still thinking about the things that he said more so probably now than when he was alive. So
Yep.
even though he's gone, I'm still thinking, well, what would my dad say? What would he have done? What did we, and we're looking through old pictures. I shared a picture um, last night. We have a group chat with my brothers and sisters, and this was from 1985. My brother just come back from work on
Mhm.
Aliens in London, and this was in Georgia, and we made this goofy dinner, and I took this picture, and we got the really bad wallpaper in the back and the goofy lamp thing hanging down, and it was so 80s. But I shared that photo, and everybody responded like, "Oh my gosh!" Like it just brought back so many. And we
Yep.
had such a good relationship with our folks, and like I said one little spat there with them, but it was great because my dad was very honest with things, and I tried to model that with my boys, and it isn't always easy. We do make mistakes as parents, and that's okay. As long as we learn from it. But wow. So Jason, tell everybody
Powerful.
where they can find you. I know you got to run, so tell everybody where they can find you. Give your plugs. This is let them have it.
I love it. Well, my name is Jason, Raitz, jasonraitz.com. You can find me on all the social medias. That's my website. My company is Speak With People, speakwithpeople.com. We have a podcast, a weekly blog. There's a communication guide that goes out every week that helps you grow as a communicator. If you go to speakwithpeople.com/resources, we have a bunch of free stuff if you want to help grow your communication. There's a free course. There's free downloads. But this has been fantastic. I just can't thank you enough for having me on and having this conversation. What you're doing is so incredibly needed, and I cannot wait to return the favor at some point. Have you on my podcast and talk
Well, I
about this
appreciate
with
it. I appreciate
our
it.
listeners as well. So I
Yep.
appreciate it.
We're local, so we still get to for coffee sometime and kind of chat
Yes.
some things. And I am planning some local events, so I just put that out on LinkedIn the other day. So I'll definitely let you know what's going on with that, and I'd love to have you involved with those. And so with that, guys, we'll wrap this one up. And again, check out Jason, and he does amazing work. So happy to have him on today. So with that, we're gonna wrap this one up. See you guys all later, and see you all next week. Thanks, Jason.